As of Wednesday night, I realized that in this bag, I have $6.2 million. Some of you might know what I'm referring to. I've got a roll of duct tape, and I've got a banana. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you might be thinking I'm crazy. But this piece of art, called Comedian by Italian artist Maurizio Catalan, sold for $6.2 million at auction Wednesday night at Sotheby's. Yeah, there's a couple. So I want to talk about this. I read it last night I was going to bed, and I didn't know how or what, but I said, I need to talk about that on Friday night. So I've been spending the day trying to figure out, what does this have to do with Jewish, right? Now, goodness knows, I've spent over a year talking and writing about all the atrocities going on in our Jewish world. And there's more that I could talk about, and I'm writing about it, and I'm posting about it on social media, but in some ways, I'm feeling a need not to ignore, because you know me well enough to, I'm not ignoring all the atrocities, but I need to get back to a little bit of normalcy. Enough said. Normalcy, $6.2 million. Now, Sotheby's installed the banana by itself in a space with an arched door within its York Avenue headquarters in New York, creating a sacred atmosphere around it. Now, it had previously displayed Comedian, great name, in 9 other cities around the world, including Dubai and Tokyo and Taipei. Catalan, who's the artist, he created Comedian because he was tired of seeing all the big, splashy canvases dominating the art fair circuit. He wanted to, quote, cut through the noise by putting something absurdly, we're going to focus on that word, absurdly simple in the center of it all, he argued. So the piece just consists of an ordinary yellow banana affixed to a white wall, and I violated a little bit because it's silver duct tape. I only had black at home, so maybe I'm only like $500,000, I don't know. Now, to keep the work intact, Catalan created a 14-page sheet of instructions that doubles as a certificate of authenticity. And in this 14 pages, it says you have to continually refresh the installation by buying your own supply of new bananas and tape. $6.2 million, and you got to buy your own, but at least you'd think you'd get a regular delivery of bananas. Now, one stipulation in the 14 pages is that the banana's curve should point right, not left, and the fruit should be displayed vertically, not horizontally like a smile, and roughly at eye level. An earlier version, because this is not the first one, it has been pointed out, an earlier version of the work debuted where? Art Basel, right here in Miami, 5 years ago. And there have been a couple. Earlier renditions have sold for between only $120,000 and $150,000 a piece. And the artist has actually, which I don't get, what was he trying to do? He tried to buy back some of these pieces. I don't know what it is he would buy back, but he offered 4 times the original price, but the sellers were not willing to, the purchasers were not willing to sell it back. I'm not making this up. I'm literally almost plagiarizing from the Wall Street Journal right here. One of the original buyers of the Comedian, one of the original pieces, donated their banana to New York's Guggenheim Museum. But the museum has not put the fruit on display yet. And then there's a Miami-based collector called Billy Cox, and he was another one of the original buyers of comedian, and he said he was transfixed as soon as he saw the piece, calling it an important historical work that comes about once or twice a century. He said that he and his wife, Beatrice, have no plans to sell their version. Let's talk for a minute. Some of you know I have my master's degree in Jewish art and art history. So how do we determine what is defined as art? And what's the value of art? Well, we can go back a little bit in time and we can see that Plato himself, he came up with the idea of mimesis, a Greek word which says that art should be mimesis, which means copying or imitating the world in beautiful, powerful ways. And until roughly the end of the 18th century, a work of art was valued based on how faithfully it replicated its subject. Professor Gordon Graham, who's the chair of the Edinburgh Sacred Arts Foundation, I can't believe I'm talking about all these sophisticated people in context of this. It's all absurd, but he's also, Professor Graham is the professor emeritus of philosophy and arts at Princeton Theological Seminary. He says that art leads people to a place of high value when it comes to very lifelike portraits, such as those of the great masters of Michelangelo, Rubens, Velázquez, and so on, and to raise questions about the value of modern art, the cubist distortions of Picasso, the surrealist figures of Miro, the abstracts of Kandinsky, or the action paintings of Jackson Pollock. That's where things get a little sketchy. I would love to see what he has to say about duct tape and bananas. Well, the fact is, though, it's very lifelike. And at the same time, I guess you could argue that it brings about lots of questions. Now, there are those who say that art should be an expression of emotional content. Audience should respond to art at a gut level, and it should touch them deeply. And that's what art should do. It should evoke emotional responses. I don't know. Not going to go there. Now, Immanuel Kant, one of the most influential early art theorists towards the end of the 18th century, he believed that art shouldn't have a concept, but instead you should find merit in art only in its formal qualities, because the content of a work of art isn't of aesthetic interest. Formal qualities became particularly important when art moved into abstraction in the 20th century, and the principles of art and design, like balance and rhythm and harmony and unity and color, these were used to define and assess art. I guess the placement of the banana matters to the artist and those who have invested in it. And then you get the avant-garde art movement, which began actually as early as the 1850s, and this was followed by other modern art movements such as Cubism and Futurism and Surrealism, in which the artist pushes the boundaries of ideas and creativities, and these represented innovative approaches to art making, and the definition expanded to include the idea of the originality of vision. The idea of originality in art continues, leading to more genres and manifestations of art, such as digital art, performance art, conceptual art, environmental art, electric art, banana and duct tape art, who knows? The banana is certainly original. And you gotta argue, it pushes boundaries. Camus, some of you know Albert Camus, the great philosopher. He said that artistic expression is the ultimate form of joy, and that all creators, Linda Wachtel, my artist, isn't here, so I want to know what she'd say about this. All creators are absurd. That's what Camus said. I think the banana, its creator, its buyer, it might be responsible for getting us laughing. And is this joy? Maybe. And maybe those involved with the piece, The artists, the investors, I say they're absurd. But hold on to this thought about absurdity, because here's where I found, after a lot of questioning and exploring, the connection to Judaism. The banana and the tapes connection to Judaism, plus the $6.2 million price tag, which is really, to me, what makes it absurd. Now we're going to switch gears. We're going to go into the Torah for a second. Got to put the banana and the duct tape away if we're going to go into the Torah. All right. Genesis 17:7. Abraham just finds out in his old age that he's going to become a father. And it says, Abraham fell upon his face and laughed and said in his heart, shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah that is 90 years old? Right after Genesis 18:12, Sarah heard the news. And Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord, being so old, and to carry a child? In the 1800s, there was a great rabbi, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. And he was one of the founders of what would become kind of modern Orthodox Judaism. He says this, the laughter of Abraham and Sarah surrounding the birth of Isaac, this laughter is triggered only by noticing something absurd. And there can be no greater absurdity than the expectation now held by Abraham and Sarah, that in their old age, they were going to become parents. Abraham was 100, Sarah was 90. And in the course of their long married life, Abraham had no children with Sarah. And now, practically at the end of their lives, they're to have a son. The birth of this child would be totally unexpected. And even if he were to be born, he would be an only child, because Ishmael was already out of the picture, right, or is out of the picture. And in all likelihood, he would be orphaned at a pretty young age. But the prospects, Hirsch says, of a great nation destined to prevail over the entire world, the hopes of all humanity are to rest on this late-born orphan youth called Isaac, called laughter. If we consider, Hirsch says, only the natural course of things, this expectation seems totally absurd. He says, like mountains hanging by air. I say, like banana hanging by duct tape. Indeed, it was, he says, a great absurdity. And even Abraham, who by throwing himself down on his face had already expressed his confidence, could not help but laugh, even though he believed in God. Great significance is attached to this laughter. It is repeated in connection with Sarah and will be evoked for all time by the name of this important biblical character, Yitzchak. Laughter. Laughter at the result of something truly absurd. The beginning of the Jewish people, Abraham and Sarah becoming parents of Yitzchak, the birth of Abraham and Sarah's son, is absurd. The sale of a banana is absurd. It's ludicrous. It's pretentious. It makes absolutely no sense. And when we hear about this, we're like Abraham and Sarah. We laugh. It's funny. It's also shocking. Think about $6.2 million, what we could do with $6.2 million in the world. It doesn't make sense. But the fact is, it's real, and it happened. Someone bought the banana. And you know what they're going to do with it? They're going to eat it. That's what they said. They're going to eat it. Absurd. And in our Torah, Isaac is born. Absurdity is real. The banana is going to be eaten. Aldous Huxley, a great philosopher, he says the human spirit is absurd. The whole process of living is absurd. And I wrestled with that quote. And then I said, well, look at us. Look at the Jewish people. We Jews, our very existence makes no sense. I think about this Holocaust Torah. It shouldn't be here. We shouldn't have survived the Holocaust and even everything that happened before. And look at what's going on around us, and we're stronger than ever, despite what people want to say. We're here. And it defies logic. And it's absurd. Now, let me make a distinction here. In this world, there's absurdity and there's madness. Absurdity is the quality of being silly, unreasonable, or absolutely hard to believe. Madness, and Dr. Ribler maybe can correct me, but madness is associated with mental issues, disorders, or extreme emotions. Artists, creators, including comedians, intentionally commit the absurd with superb, brilliant genius. Madness is not grounded in anything intelligent. Absurdity is intelligence in a context of madness. The human spirit is absurd. The whole process of living is absurd. When it comes to $6.2 million being spent on a banana, we laugh at the absurdity, just like our ancestors laughed at the idea that they were going to become parents when they were almost 100 years old. And we wrestle with the absurdity just like Jacob did, Isaac's son, when he was jumped by an angel. And he earned his name. Jacob was changed to Israel, the God wrestler. An absurd story, but yet we proudly call ourselves B'nai Israel, the children of Israel. Because the fact is, when you really think about it, many of us in this congregation, we pride ourselves on being rationalists. We love our science, but we also love our Torah. And we read that Torah and we wrestle with it. We don't run from the absurdity, and we shouldn't see absurdity as a bad word. It just defies logic. And we laugh when we experience it. We wrestle with it when it happens. And Isaac is born, and crazy artwork that we might not understand is brought into this world. And Jews survive the unthinkable, and don't just survive it, we thrive. It's truly absurd. The absurdity is there for us to wrestle with, to try to figure out. It's part of this great mystery. Call it God's plan, call it God's mystery. And let us remember Camus' words. All creators are what? Absurd. And who's the ultimate creator? God. The windows on the wall remind us of that. Absurdity is Jewish reality. And it's our job to try to make sense of it all, to make sense of the chaos and live meaningful lives in the chaos. At the very beginning of the world, at the very beginning of the creation story, which we just read, it says the world, the Hebrew phrase tohu vavohu. I often like to translate it as controlled chaos. But as I was thinking, it was absurdity. Nothing made sense. And God didn't get rid of the tohu vavohu. God tried to make sense of the absurdity. With this absurdity surrounding us all the time, I think in part that's why we were given Shabbat, a time to disconnect the best we can from the absurdity and process it all. Make some sense out of the absurdity. Catch our breath before the absurdity begins again. And actually appreciate that within the absurdity, we can find, even in this process, sparks of light that make our lives better. Now, I can't say I've found the light in the $6.2 million banana yet. But that being said, I have to say, it got me thinking and wrestling and writing in anticipation of this service. So that in and of itself, to me, is a little bit of light from the absurdity. So I challenge all of you to find some meaning in the banana or find some meaning in some of the other absurdity we wrestle with. And I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.